All right, so this is the fourth part of 6 here of taking shelter of Krishna. And last time we understood oh good, oh, some of the people are coming. Last time we understood how currently we're in an unnatural and a kind of difficult situation. Right? Our hearts we've turned inward. And so we're not aware of Krishna's love, which is all pervading, really, and is shining on everybody. And we also have had our capacity to love be severely reduced. And so that we quoted this verse from the Gita, the purport from this 337 purport in the Gita, when Prabhupada says, when a living entity comes in contact with the material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust or desire in association with the mode of passion. Or in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust, as milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. So love by nature is a giving and receiving. It's an opening, really. And so it says here, when we come into the material nature, we become kind of self-absorbed. That's really what it comes down to, and we're left with. And here it explains further in Bhagavad Gita 339 that thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, desire, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. And so we're left with an emptiness. Right? By nature, the soul is happy, satisfied, and loving. We're overflowing is the normal nature. But now we feel there's something lacking. And that's because we've lost the connection with our true loving nature, and we've lost the connection with the getting of Krishna's love. So there's something missing. And because we can't understand how we've made that transformation, we just think this is normal. And so I've got a quote from His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, who kind of talks a little bit about this situation. In his Spiritual Warrior 2, it's from the preface. He says, although we are all inherently loving beings, we have forgotten our true nature and sacrificed our birthright for a seductive substitute that ultimately brings us pain rather than joy. Because our collective goal has become to gratify our physical senses above all else, we have developed a self-centered culture that condones competition, exploitation, and whatever it takes to get us what we want. So he said that this actually affects our whole society, the way we deal with one another, is that we have this notion that happiness is acquired, that has to be found, and that we keep doing it. You know, we've and it's not just even the physical senses. We get pleasure from happy thoughts. We get happiness from sometimes understandings, and many times we get it from our egos. If somebody praises us in some way, we feel a real happiness. If somebody criticizes us, we feel anger or unhappiness. And all of these, as we talked about last time, all of these kind of quick fixes last for only a short time. Krishna says all of these types of happinesses that we're trying to find here by consuming and acquiring, the happiness is short-lived, and you're left still empty. So it puts us in this really, really difficult situation. So in Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he says, yet despite the widespread physical suffering throughout the world today, ultimately the difficulties confronting us are not material, but spiritual. These problems reflect our failure to fulfill our deepest longings to love and be loved, and any solution will require more than just a sophisticated technological effort. We may have made great scientific progress, but as a culture, we still have little understanding of love and even less appreciation for the spiritual dimensions of life. The strife and destruction that surround us point to an urgent need to remedy the situation. We must learn how to love ourselves and how to love our home planet and the other living beings who reside here with us. Excuse me. So we're in this difficult situation. People aren't able to find lasting satisfaction. Usually when you get what you want, even if it's not what you expected, it doesn't last as long as you think. You think, now I'll finally be happy, because we're disconnected from Krishna's love and our ability to love. And so we need to be reminded, right, that Krishna loves us and that we are made for love, and we're acting actually in ways that are not aware of that, and we're not prioritizing that and not dealing with that. So we also mentioned last time that if we open our hearts to the rays of Krishna's love, we realize that we have someone like that, someone like Krishna. So it's not some insignificant love, and that the love is unconditional. This is an important point we made. It's unconditional. It's not something we have to earn. It's not something we can lose. Krishna knows who we are at a very deep level, our eternal nature. And so he never gives up on us, even if we're not dealing with him, even if we're hostile. We mentioned the situation with the Asuras. They despise Krishna even. And Krishna still arranges to send his devotees to them to help them. So if we can understand a little bit that we're loved by someone so great as Krishna unconditionally. I mean, I don't know if you've had that experience, or you have somebody who just, what if you had somebody that knew everything about you, all the good and all the bad, and still loved you completely? I think most of the time we have to be concerned about that. What would people think if they knew our deepest, darkest secrets? Would they still like us? Would they still love us? With Krishna, he knows everything from all past lifetimes. He still loves us anyway. So if we had a little bit of faith in that, our heart would begin to soften. When we're in kind of the struggle to find happiness, and we're in competition, as Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj says, our heart tends to get hard because we're trying hard to find some happiness. We have to be tough. That begins to melt. It begins to soften, at least eventually melts in bhakti, and we have an increased capacity for love. Now, we will find that this is easier said than done, and so these next three sessions, this one and the next following two, are going to deal with things that make it difficult to do this, to just open our hearts to Krishna and to welcome his love and to respond. And one of those things is kind of our condition. That here we're small little creatures, and we're living in a huge world that's both fairly unpredictable and mostly uncontrollable. And so there's anxiety. We're vulnerable here, right? We try. I mean, people want to try to find ways to control their circumstances. We all try to do that to some degree. But there's so many things. In the Shastras it says, right, there's three sources of miseries. Right? Our own minds and bodies give us trouble. You can't control the mind, right? Sometimes we have really negative thoughts even about ourselves. We can't control our minds very well. And of course, we get various ailments of the physical body. That's there. We have other living creatures, right? And we can't control them all very easily. If we take sometimes even if we take elaborate defensive measures. And then there's the forces of nature. Drought, hurricanes, floods. All the different things you can have. Epidemics. All these things you can have. And so that puts us in a position of naturally we feel somewhat vulnerable. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen with the economy? What's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with this political situation? What's going to happen with so many things? They're unpredictable and they're uncontrollable. We're kind of at the mercy of many greater forces than we can manage. And so I think in many ways, we all have to have some kind of background of a feeling of being vulnerable. And that leads to worry, anxiety, and fear. That's a pretty pervasive situation. Somewhere in the background, we're engaging a lot of our energy and worrying about this and wondering about that and trying to find some way to control it. But really, there's very little we can do about many things in this world. And Prabhupada mentions this a lot. There's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam that compares the spiritual world with the material world. And it says, that the Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, is a place where there's no anxiety. That's one translation of it. But at the end, it says that in this world, it says there's danger at every step. And so Prabhupada mentions this a lot. He quotes the verse a lot. And I have a quote from a lecture that he gave on the Srimad Bhagavatam in 1973 in Los Angeles. And Prabhupada says, this is kind of a typical statement here for Prabhupada. He says, we in this material world are confused step by step. This is our position, step by step, every step. Padam padam vipadat. This is from the verse, the Sanskrit of the verse. Padam padam means every step. Vipadat, danger. It is such a place, he said. It is such a nice place. He's sarcastic here. This material world, that every step there is danger. So there's accidents, so many things that happen. So he says it's like that. We're vulnerable. We're in danger, seemingly. So in order for us to really take shelter of Krishna, it really takes more than just knowing that he loves us. Right? We need to understand that we're under Krishna's protection. This is important for us. So otherwise, it feels nice. And of course, that would not be protected by Krishna is kind of implied by his love, but it may not be clear to us. And so we think, I may have time to contemplate Krishna's love and think about this, but what about all my other worries? What about all my other troubles? And of course, it doesn't mean that when we take shelter of Krishna that we don't take normal precautions and things like that. But there are so many things that are uncontrollable that we worry about in the background, and be fearful of in the background. It's like that. So we need to be able to understand that Krishna, if we take shelter of Krishna, we have serious protection. That so many worries needn't be present any longer. And Krishna says himself in Bhagavad Gita 9:31, he says, he quickly becomes righteous and attains lasting peace. He's talking to O son of Kunti, that's Arjuna. He says, declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes. Declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes. There's another verse where he says, I preserve what they have and carry to them what they lack. Yoga and Shema are the Sanskrit words. Shema is protection. Yes, amongst the merchants and other kinds of business people in the Vedic culture, you would ask them about your security, your protection, your Shema. And yoga means, in this case, acquisition, things you need and things that you are trying to protect. As Krishna says, I help you with that. And then there's a famous bhajan, Bhajahure Mana, that Prabhupada would sometimes sing, and he gave an explanation of it, and he says, and it's good because it's Krishna's Prabhupada's given name was Abhay Charan De, and Abhay Charan, it means Charan means feet, and so Abhay means without fear. Bhaya is fear, and is the negation. Just like in English, you put an A in front of something, you can negate it. So it means someone who's without fear because they've taken shelter of the feet of the Lord. The Charan, it's explained that way. And so it says Abhay Charan means he's the fearless shelter. Prabhupada says, if we take shelter of Krishna, then we become free from all anxieties. It says, just like a helpless child, when he's taken care of by his parents, he becomes careless, carefree, he says, not careless, carefree. Similarly, I am requesting, my dear mind, you do not drive in this way dangerously. Please worship Lord Krishna, who is fearless shelter. Vajahure mana Sri Nanda Nandana Abhaya Charana Ravindare. His lotus feet is fearless shelter. So when Srila Prabhupada was initiated, his guru kept that name, but he added Aravinda, so it's Abhaya Charana Aravinda. Because it means Aravinda means lotus. So he's the one who's fearless, he's taking shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. So when you see AC Bhaktivedanta Swami, the AC is Abhaya Charana Aravinda. At the feet of Krishna, that someone who's taken the shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna can be without fear. Abhaya. That's what it says. But then we may wonder about that. Different things. I mean, Krishna seems to be far away. And he's up in the spiritual world in the Loka Vrindavan, which is well, we can't even measure how far that would be. And in the Vedic astronomical understanding, it's outside of the universe. There's a whole larger area. There's a multiverse. It's what they talk about it these days. And if you could leave this universe, reach the end of this universe, and come out, you would be in an area where there's so many other universes. It's a whole area, and then you have to exit that to get into the spiritual realm, and that's immensely huge. There's so many spiritual planets, and Krishna's planet is way far inside. So Krishna seems far away from us. There's millions of universes with one little tiny being in one planet in one universe. And Krishna seems to be very, very, very far away. And so is Krishna really going to be, able to help us? Is he really somebody who can protect us and care for us? And Krishna says, but Krishna actually is near, and in different ways. And one of them, Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, text 7. He says, O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on the thread. So you have a necklace, a pearl necklace. It's held together by the thread. And so the Krishna has this power of sat. It's the power of existence. And so everything that exists is coming from that potency, that power. It's an extension of his existence. It's like we're resting on Krishna like those pearls on a necklace. He's holding us up. We can't even exist without Krishna's presence. So he's right there. We can rest comfortably, almost like in Krishna's hands. He has us. And then in the 9th chapter of the Gita, he says, in it's text number 4, he says, by me, in my unmanifested form, it's not visible to our eyes, this entire universe is pervaded. He says, all beings are in me, but I am not in them. He says, they're inside me in one sense. He's got his beautiful form with the flute, but really everything that exists is part of Krishna, or the greater Krishna. He says everything is in me. So how far? He's not anything inside is not far away. The distance isn't an issue. In the Isha Upanishad, it mentions how Krishna is both near and far, because space doesn't have any meaning for him. Space also is his energy. Krishna, interestingly enough, is not a being in the world. The world is really part of him. So time and space, those are his energies. He can do with them what he likes. So they have no meaning for Krishna. It says there's another place in the Isha Upanishad that says that he can, while we're mating in one place, he can catch anybody and it says overtake anybody running or moving or traveling in any way. So someone's trying to Krishna doesn't have to move and he's there. Because he can be at every space at once. Space doesn't have any meaning, so there's no distance for Krishna, no distance limitations for Krishna in any way. So in that way, Krishna is the distance. We perceive it to be a huge distance, Krishna doesn't. So that's not a problem for him at all to be there. And then he says also in 9:6, he says, understand that as the mighty wind blowing everywhere always rests in the sky, all created beings rest in me. So that's another way to look at it. Space itself is Krishna. It's his energy. It comes from him. Without Krishna, there's no space. There's no creation, there's nothing. So actually, Krishna is really close by. He's as close as he needs to be. So we don't have to worry about that. Krishna's far away, my protection's far away, and all my problems are close. So there's trouble for that. No, Krishna's right here. Krishna's right here. That's not an issue. The other thing we might worry is that there's so many devotees, so many universes, so many planets, and in the Chaitanya Charitamrita it says that if you filled a large bucket full of mustard seeds, that gives you some outside estimate of how many universes there are. And so maybe Krishna doesn't notice. He's busy, he's got a lot of stuff to do. Maybe he doesn't notice if there's something happening to us. So even if he's close by and could do something, maybe he doesn't notice. That could be a problem. Is Krishna really watching? And so in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the very, very first verse, he's abhigya. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all, is fully cognizant, has all knowledge. Abhigya is the Sanskrit word. And in the verse says, he is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. So he says, so he's fully cognizant. He knows everything. So he doesn't have like, we have certain limitations of our mental capacity, and Krishna doesn't have that, or our ability to sense. We pay attention to one thing, something else we can't see. But Krishna doesn't have that problem. The process unlimited quantities of information, and so that's not an issue. And here it says, and there's a lecture on the Bhagavad Gita that Prabhupada gave in very early days in 1966 in New York, and he says, and in the Srimad Bhagavatam, you'll find that the definition of the Supreme Lord is given as Sarvagya, means fully knowledgeable. Sarvagya, Sarva is all, and Gya is knowledge. Sarvajna means one who knows everything, and he says past, present, future, he says everything. So he already knows when something might be coming. Past, present, and future. So he not only knows everything happening now, he knows everything that happened and everything that will happen. Three-colored Gya is called. Krishna has that capacity. So there's not a problem with information processing. There's not a question of attentiveness. It's not a question of him being able to handle the whole load here of protecting so many devotees. So nothing's going to slip by. He's never going to be asleep at the switch. He's able to do that. And then also, we can consider that Krishna, we already heard the Bhagavad Gita 15:15, where it says he resides in the heart. It's called the Paramatma, or the super soul. There's a form of Krishna that lives in our hearts. And this is when the yogis see him. We're going to hear a description of how the yogis who can, in deep meditation, can see him and give some description of him. But this kind of resolves both of those doubts, being far away and maybe being overburdened at once, because in each of us, Krishna is residing in the heart, and it says there's a verse, it's in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Prabhupada quotes this a lot. and it's there in the purport to the Srimad Bhagavatam 10:87:38. Two companion birds sit together in the shelter of the same as a peepal tree, the banyan tree. One of them is relishing the taste of the tree's berries, while the other refrains from eating and instead watches over his friend. So in this analogy, the two birds are the soul and the super soul. The tree is the body, and the taste of the berries are the varieties of sensory pleasures. So right there, again, there's the notion of a friend. Two companions or two friends are there. So Krishna is kindly sitting in our hearts. And so in the Bhagavatam, second canto, second chapter, and then there's like 4 verses here. I'm going to recite to you because I think it's just a beautiful thing to imagine what he is like there. Okay, Krishna is in the form of the super soul. Is like and what it's like. So he's right with us, like individually, like a companion, observing everything. So in this case he's really physically close. In this case, he's attentive. Both things, that's his job. He's watching us and helping in different ways. Sometimes it says that when we have intuition, right? It says Krishna speaks through our power of understanding. The super soul does like that. It's the way it does that. But we already heard how the super soul helps us with knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. In Bhagavad Gita 15:15. So he's acting all the time. So therefore, we have a form of Krishna. And it says that he's not in the heart of every human, but every living being, even within atoms. So every place where there's a soul, there's a form of Krishna, close by and attentive. So it deals with both of those things. Krishna is not far away, and he's not able to be distracted and be unaware of our difficulties. So it's just these are just beautiful verses. So I thought I would just share these right now. It says his mouth expresses his happiness. He's smiling. His eyes spread like the petals of a lotus, and his garments, yellowish like the saffron of a kadamba flower, are bedecked with valuable jewels. His ornaments are all made of gold, set with jewels, and he wears a glowing headdress and earrings. His lotus feet are placed over the whorls of the lotus-like hearts of great mystics. On his chest is the Kaustuba jewel, engraved with a beautiful calf. And there are other jewels on his shoulders. His complete torso is garlanded with fresh flowers. He is well decorated with an ornamental wreath about his waist and rings studded with valuable jewels on his fingers. His leglets, his bangles, his oiled hair, curling with a bluish tint, and his beautiful smiling face are all very pleasing. And he says, the Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glances of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation. So there are certain yogis, certain types of bhakti yogis who deal with deep types of meditation. It's not current so much in this day and age. Controlling the mind is more difficult, but people could do that, and they could visibly see the super soul there, Paramatma there, Krishna, that form of Krishna there. So he's smiling and glancing around with almost playful. The Prabhupada mentioned, he says the pastimes here, magnanimous pastimes. He's magnanimous. The word pastime, lila, also can mean playful. So he's playfully glancing with his smiling face. Sweetly. So we've got this very sweet and beautiful form of Krishna right here with us. Like two birds in a tree, two companions. So so that really addresses both of those two doubts. Krishna's far away and maybe can't do it, and or he might not be attentive enough to know what's going on. And so that's the third thing is, well, maybe Krishna can't do anything. Right? There was a famous book, why do bad things happen to good people, by this Rabbi Kirshner, was his name. And he was trying to explain. It's the question we're going to deal with a little bit later, before we're done here. Is he said, why does it happen that we see, even good people go through suffering and reversals and problems? And if God is all good, and he's all powerful, that's a question we're going to answer next. Uh, is because that's another doubt. Maybe Krishna can't handle it. And so he says, yeah, if God's all good and all powerful, why do bad things happen? Why is there evil? Why is there these kind of things? Why are there even bad things done at all? Much less why do bad things happen to seemingly good and religious people? I think he was a rabbi, so I think he was deeply affected by the Holocaust and was trying to find a way to not blame God for that. Here, religious people being killed, so many. And so his conclusion was that God was well-meaning, but he just didn't have the power. He's maybe created the world, but he just hasn't quite got it under control. He has to debug it, I guess. So the program is a little bit beyond him sometimes. We make complicated computer programs, and it's difficult to debug. So things happen that we hadn't intended. He took that kind of thing, but that's not the reality, though. Krishna actually has the power. I mean, it's all over the place in all the scriptures. I've got a quote from the 10th canto, chapter 56, text 26. It says, Jambavan said, I know now that you are the light, he's talking to Krishna. I know now that you are the life, air, and the sensory, mental, and bodily strength of all living beings. You are Lord Vishnu, the original person, the supreme, all-powerful controller. Also in the first verse of the Bhagavatam, it says that he's Swarat. And Swa means self. The prophet says fully independent, is how he translates it there. And because since Krishna has created everything, everything is him, and he has all power, he can do anything without having, there's nothing that can limit his activities. He's fully independent. There's nothing that can limit what he can do. There's no other higher powers. There's no laws of nature. I mean, people used to think about that a lot when they, back in the earlier days of science, when it's okay, there's laws of nature. So how could miracles, occur? This is happening a lot in the Western world. So they're thinking of the Bible and thinking how the Red Sea was supposed to have parted, and so that for the and various other miracles take place. Well, then how can that happen? If there's laws of nature, how can that can't happen? But God creates the laws of nature and can change them. They don't limit him in any way, shape, or form. He makes it one way, he can suspend those and do something else. It's not an issue. And then Krishna says in 1042, he says, what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe. And all the universes, actually, all the universes he creates and controls and supports with just a portion of himself. It's Mahavishnu. It's a portion of Krishna who creates all the universes. This is very easy. So there's just so many different places that it says in the Brahma Samhita, right, that he's the Ishvara Parama, the supreme cause of all causes. So he can change that. And then in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Anchalila 1129, there's a prayer to the Lord. He says, my dear Lord, you are the fully independent personality of Godhead. You act by your own free will. You cause the whole world to dance and act as you like. So there's not a circumstance that Krishna is not able to contend with. There's not a situation that he can't, that's too big for him. Because it says in the invocation to the Isha Upanishad that there's this, that the Lord is complete, and that the Lord emanates so many other complete things, the universes and other types of things. It emanates and remains complete, even despite emanating so many things. So if you took all of creation away, Krishna could just manifest it again without effort. He didn't even lose any potential energy. So it's all very simple. No, there's nothing that's difficult. Somebody asked Prabhupada, there was a kind of a, this is an old philosophical conundrum, right? If God is omniscient, I mean, omnipotent, has all powers, could God create something too heavy for him to lift? And Prabhupada said, yes, he's omnipotent. Then he would lift it. So it becomes stronger than that. So he just increases and becomes stronger. So, but still, just like Rabbi Krishna, we find in the scriptures and we find in modern times that sometimes devotees seem to suffer reversals. Despite all these things, Krishna says they never perish. That all of our doubts about him being not powerful enough, not close enough, not attentive enough are debunked. That's not true. But still, it seems that devotees sometimes will suffer. We have a really prominent one. It's there in the Bhagavatam, and it's there. It comes from the Mahabharata. Bhishma. Bhishma Pitama, the grandfather of the Pandavas. He wasn't actually blood related, but he was in that condition of being an elder and very, very affectionate to them. He fought on the side of the Kauravas in the Battle of Kurukshetra. He was very affectionate to the Pandavas and really was sympathetic to their cause, but he felt an obligation. The warriors are kind of like that. They will kind of fight for whatever side, they figure the fight will take care of itself, who's right and who's wrong. So he was receiving some maintenance from Duryodhana, so he felt obliged to fight even though he thought the Pandavas were right. And he was killed. Well, he was wounded because he had this benediction that he could only die by his own will. So, but he said he was hit by so many arrows that he could lie on the arrows of the bed. He was lying on a bed of arrows that were piercing his body, and he could so he was there. After the battle, he was still alive, and the Pandavas and Krishna came to see him. But he was a great devotee of Krishna, very great devotee of Krishna. He was even able to. I mean, there was a beautiful story during the battle that Krishna cheated to help Arjuna. That Duryodhana, he was thinking that Bhishma, he was the most powerful warrior there. That he was holding back. He wasn't, because he was affectionate to Arjuna and his brothers. And they also understood that their cause was just. He wasn't fighting to his complete capacity. So Duryodhana kind of insulted him, or at least accused him of that. And to a warrior, your honor is huge. And so he became very upset. And he told him, he says, you give me 5 arrows. And tomorrow I'll use these arrows. I will kill all 5 of the Pandavas. She doubt my sincerity here in fighting. And so he did that. And Krishna was, a little nervous about that. And he managed to steal those arrows. And Krishna, and Bhishma understood that Krishna had done it. And so he made a vow. So this is like a relationship where he says, okay, tomorrow I'm going to attack Arjuna. I'm going to give it everything I have. And because Krishna had made a vow that he would not fight in the battle. He was driving Arjuna's chariot, but he gave a choice to Arjuna and to Duryodhana, to Arjuna, that you can have me in a non-combat role, or you can have my armies. And Arjuna took him in a non-combat role, and Duryodhana was very happy to get his armies. So Krishna's army was on the other side. And so he said, I will attack Arjuna. And so either Krishna will have to watch him die, or he'll have to break his vow. And so he did this. He did that. Arjuna was almost killed, and Krishna he jumps off the chariot in anger. It says he had like the top cloth on. It came off, and he grabbed this wheel that had fallen off one of the chariots, and he was coming with it overhead to kill Bhishma, who then kneeled down and was ready to be killed by Krishna. And then at that moment, the battle ended. And so what happened there was that there was a sweet exchange. That technically it says the chariot wheel is not a weapon, and so technically Krishna didn't break his vow, but the reality was visible. Right? And so Bhishma had got the glory that he'd gotten revenge on Krishna in that way. So it was a sweet exchange, which actually it's called the rasa of chivalry. And so Krishna allowed that. He wanted Bhishma to be satisfied. So, because he could have prevented him from being so effective on the battlefield, but he didn't interfere. And so there was a sweet exchange there. So he was a great, but there he was killed. He was killed. The Pandavas had a similar thing, right? I mean, Krishna helped them in the end, obviously, but they really, they had to go through so many difficulties. You think their life would be smooth? They had to be exiled twice. They had to, even then they had to kill all their relatives. That wasn't very pleasant for them. Arjuna decided to fight, but it wasn't necessarily the most pleasant thing. There's so many other. Srila Prabhupada had misfortunes. There was a time before he came to America. He was living very simply. He was a sannyas by that time. I believe it. He was simply trying. He was trying to write and print the first 3 volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He wanted to bring those with him when he went to the West. And so he had almost no money. He was just collecting a little bit and spending it all on the buying paper and the printers and all that kind of stuff. And he was, going around trying to, he was living a very, very, simple and austere life. And when he was doing that, one time a cow came and gored him. And he said he didn't ever explain deeply inside, but he said that at first I didn't understand. He says later I understood why that happened. And then when he was on the Jaladutam, he was on the ship coming from India to America for the first time, he had a couple of heart attacks. So there are difficulties he went through. He had once he was in Manhattan, he was staying with these kind of young hippie folks, and one of them had a bad LSD trip and was ready to physically attack him. He had to flee. So sometimes it didn't always go easy for him either. We see contemporary devotees who sometimes have reversals. And so then we think, well, what is it about there that we have that? And so there's really a couple of explanations for that, and it depends on whether the devotee is a kind of a developing devotee or already a very deep connected devotee. And so, like, we also have Prahlad Maharaj, the son of the great demon Hiranyakashipu, who Krishna protected him also every time, but his father tried to kill him in so many ways because he didn't like the idea that he was a devotee. So there's many times you have, and so in those cases when Krishna comes and protects them personally, there's the famous prayers by Arjuna's mother Kunti, who says that whenever bad things happen, that's when you show up. Because whenever things are going well for us, we don't see you. We don't see you. But when we are in danger, then you come. So she says, let more bad things happen. Let them happen again and again and again. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one of our great acharyas, he says that for devotees, who are deeply connected with Krishna, it's always pleasing to see Krishna. Right? He says just like he says like cool water is pleasant in the summertime and warm water in the cold weather months. He says when the devotee is in danger and Krishna, like the knight in shining armor comes and rescues them, it's a beautiful feeling. It's the adventure. And so their relationship deepens by that. It's fun, it's lila, it's play. And for those of us who don't have that type of relationship, it's also meant to deepen the relationship, but in a little bit different way. And so in the Srimad Bhagavatam 10:14:8, there's a really famous verse how it says that the devotees, even if they're suffering, right, they offer obeisances kind of like from the core of their heart to Krishna. And in the purport it says, although a devotee has surrendered to the Lord's devotional service, until he is completely perfect in Krishna consciousness, he may maintain a slight inclination, sometimes a bigger inclination, to enjoy the false happiness of this world. The Lord therefore creates a particular situation to eradicate this remaining enjoying spirit. This unhappiness suffered by a sincere devotee is not technically a karmic reaction. It is rather the Lord's special mercy for inducing his devotee to completely let go of the material world and return home, back to Godhead. So Krishna is acting in ways, even if it's, so if we feel the protection of Krishna doesn't necessarily mean that all the things we want, all the good things we want to happen and nothing bad happens. Because Krishna he's looking out for our real welfare. He's trying to help us to be able to connect with his love and your own loving ability. And so just like parents, if you give your children everything they want all the time, it's not good for them. They don't have the judgment to know what's good for them. So you have to be mindful. You have to try to help them to make the right choices, do the right things. And so Krishna also, this is what he's doing with us. So he may bring some seeming misfortune, but it's calibrated to help us to break free from blockages that are keeping our love from manifesting. We need to also remember that this life is not exactly meant, especially if we have higher aspirations, it's not meant just for happiness. It's a short life, and it's one of many millions we have. This is one of the first things that Prabhupada always speaks about. So one of the first things Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad Gita is that we're eternal souls, and we've taken so many different births. So we can't find a lasting happiness here anyway. And in the Vedas, generally, it's like the human life is a life we can begin to connect with God. That's the real value here. And anything that contributes to that value is more important than immediate pleasure or happiness. Because when we see, we grow old, we die, or something else happens even before that. This is one small life among many, and so if we look at it that way, it's just like sometimes we do things even in this life. We take on difficulties for a future goal. People who are athletes, they might not enjoy training every day, but they're looking for the future happiness and be successful and make money. These kinds of people, people may work hard in their business, and that the hard work may not be always pleasant, but they're looking for their future payoff. And so in the same way that Krishna if Krishna brings some difficulty, you can be guaranteed that this is meant to help you move forward. Deepen your connection with him, deepen your ability to love, deepen your ability to receive his love. And if we look at it in terms of so many lifetimes and that this lifetime is short, then it's not, life is not just meant about happiness, because the happiness goes away anyway. We have it and then it's gone. We have to take another life. So we should use this life to build something that's permanent. Our connection with Krishna is something permanent. That's the idea. There's one interesting story. There's in the Bhagavatam of the Avanti Brahmana. We're running out of time, so I'm going to real quickly. But he apparently had some connection with Krishna, either early in life or in past lives. but somehow he really got off the track. And he was a Brahmin, and so generally the Brahmins they have a vow of poverty. They teach and perform, sacrifices and sacraments and things like that. But they it says they never keep any money on hand. Anything spare they give away, give in charity. So they don't keep a bank balance, as Prabhupada would say. They just keep what they need and don't charge for their services. They just live on contributions. And but he was kind of greedy, and so he became a agricultural magnate. That's usually what the Vaishyas do. And he was quite successful and built up a bit of a fortune. But so somehow he was so attached to that money that having it was such a big thing. He didn't even spend it on himself. He was a super miser. So even usually you people make money to enjoy it, but he wouldn't even spend it on himself. And of course, it caused his family members difficulty. He certainly wasn't spending it on them. And and he says he wouldn't even spend on sacrifices, for the devas or for God. And then after some time, he started to have these misfortunes. There was drought, and so he lost some certain years. There was no harvest. His house burned down, so he had unexpected maintenance bills. No insurance, I guess, at that time. There were thieves. His family somehow managed to find ways to get some of the money because they needed to use it, and he just finally was just flat broke. And um, his family just kicked him out, because he was no use to them any longer. And it says for a long time he meditated on his loss because it was so money was so important, and then somehow it hit him that this was the Lord's mercy, and he became completely relieved of everything. So there's a verse also in the Bhagavatam that Prabhupada had this real connection with, where he said, sometimes when the devotees have a desire to be closer to Krishna, but there are things which are a sincere desire, but there are things, certain habits or certain attachments that are blocking the way, then Krishna sometimes he causes them misfortune like that. Prabhupada saw that in his own life. So a few times he was almost ready to be a large a pharmaceutical magnate. He thought he would finance his Guru Maharaj's mission. And instead he always lost everything. Prabhupada says, Krishna made me a business failure. And eventually Krishna only wanted him, not his wealth and not his other abilities, just his surrender. So we can feel in all ways protected by Krishna. He's going to focus on our real welfare, and things are going to happen in that way. Unnecessary things will protect us from, but anything that's seemingly negative is it's made especially for you for that purpose, to try to help you to grow, so we can feel fully. We don't need to have fear. We can feel fully protected by it. Okay, so we're almost running out of time. So is there any comments or questions or complaints or doubts? Okay, so and next time we'll talk about we have two more sessions, and we'll talk about two more other things that may kind of be obstacles in our taking shelter of Krishna, things that hold us back. And that even if we understand the concept and it sounds good, there are things that block us. We find that we find that it's relatively easy to at least accept the principle and have some faith in it. But there are things that hold us back. We've built certain structures here to survive in this kind of artificial environment, and they don't all just give way so easily. So we've got a couple more. I think we're going to talk about judgment next time. Focus of that, something that holds us back. And then the last one I think is humility. Doesn't hold us back, but what we need, pride, that just holds us back, and the desire to be the controllers.
Oh, Gary, I did have a question. Where can we find the recordings?
I can send them to you if you like.
Yes, please.
I'm keeping them. Yeah, if anybody wants them, I can send you a link. I'm keeping them up on my OneDrive. So I do.
Okay,
They get up. That's when I stop the recording, it gets put up there, and I can send you a link to do that.
okay,